Okay, let's dive into this. Because today we are exploring a civilization so incredibly old, so vast, and honestly, so full of deep historical currents that it completely changes how we look at human history. We're talking about 4,000 years of Chinese history. But listen, we aren't just going to read down a dry timeline of random events here. As we unpack this explainer, I really want you to hold onto this one core metaphor. Chinese history is like an endless cycle of breathing in and breathing out. It's this constant, fascinating rhythm. You get intense unity, that's the breath in, and then fragmentation and division, the breath out. It's an epic, endless journey of rising, falling, and then, inevitably, rising all over again.
So, to wrap our heads around this monumental story, we're going to break it down into 5 great Greths, or eras, if you will. First, river routes to the first emperor, then golden ages and trade routes, next up the Mongol conquest, followed by the Ming Dynasty and Great Walls, and finally, the end of the empire. Think of this as our roadmap for the world's most enduring, continuous civilization. Let's get going.
Let's move to and see how this builds. This is essentially your mental map for our journey. We are talking about a totally awe-inspiring scale of time here. Just take a look at this span. We go from the Shang Dynasty roughly 3,000 years ago all the way down to the Qing Dynasty in 1644. We're talking generations upon generations of raw power, wild innovation, and serious resilience.
Right, let's jump right into era number 1, river routes to the first emperor. Way back in the day, simple farmers living along the Yellow River eventually laid the groundwork for the Shang Dynasty. They actually left behind these incredible bronze objects and even secret messages carved straight into animal bones. But as we'll see, that initial unity didn't last forever. China eventually fractured into this really dark, chaotic period of warring states, which brings us to a wildly important number, 13. Back in 259 BCE, a boy named Ying Zheng was born. And by the time he was only 13 years old, he became the king of a highly ambitious Western state called Qin. Think about that for a second. A 13-year-old kid. Yet he possessed this immense, incredibly patient ambition. He didn't want peace treaties to end the warring period. Oh no, he wanted total, absolute conquest. And, well, he actually pulled it off. After years of brutal planning and relentless battles, this single boy grew up and conquered literally all of his rivals. By 221 BCE, he completely unified China and gave himself a brand new, super intimidating title, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. The sheer scale of his organizational brilliance is honestly staggering. He tied together this deeply fractured land by enforcing one single system of writing, so everyone could finally understand each other, and he completely standardized their money, their roads, even their measurements. But make absolutely no mistake here, this massive unification, it was strictly held together by brilliant but deeply fear-based control. Which brings us to a much more recent year, 1974. See, despite all his absolute power, the first emperor had one massive fear. He was utterly terrified of dying. He actually sent people out to find immortality potions, which, spoiler alert, definitely did not work. And he even went as far as banning the word death from being spoken in his palace. His ultimate final secret stayed completely hidden in the earth for over 2 millennia, until a group of farmers happened to be digging a well in 1974.
And what they uncovered was absolutely mind-blowing. An entire underground world, the Terracotta Army. We're talking thousands of handcrafted clay soldiers. And get this, every single one has a completely unique face, expression, and posture. Plus, life-sized horses and chariots. It took thousands upon thousands of workers years to build this whole shebang entirely by hand, just to protect him in the afterlife. It's a breathtaking archaeological marvel, for sure. But it's also this profound psychological statement. It shows exactly how far one very powerful man will go and the massive resources he'll use when he is literally terrified of the end.
Okay, moving into our second era, golden ages and trade routes. Now, empires built purely on fear, they're actually incredibly fragile. So when the Qin dynasty collapsed pretty quickly after the first emperor's death, China took a deep, fresh breath in, bringing forth the Han and eventually the Tang dynasties.
And this brilliantly illustrates the contrasting styles of leadership in Chinese history. On one side, you have Qin Shi Huang's strict, totally uncompromising role. But then, on the other side, you have the founder of the new Han dynasty, a guy named Liu Bang.
What's so amazing about Liu Bang is that he wasn't some royal prince or high-ranking general. He was literally a simple village official. He rose to power by building alliances and actually understanding regular people. By ruling with a much softer hand, reducing taxes, and, actually listening to his advisors, he allowed the entire country to finally rest and recover. And that softer touch, it sparked a spectacular cultural explosion. During the Han and later the magnificent Tang dynasty, which was from roughly 600 to 900 CE, China entered a true golden age. This is when the famous Silk Road really got flowing. It acted like this massive superhighway connecting the East and the West. And they weren't just trading silk, spices, and porcelain. They were trading ideas, religions, and science. At its absolute peak, the Tang capital city, Chang'an, was a vibrant, bustling megacity with over 1 million residents. It was the absolute creative center of the world, just packed with poets, painters, and scholars. It was this beautiful time of immense peace and booming creativity. But history, as we know, never sits still for long. So we have to ask ourselves, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an ancient wall? That brings us to our third Rus, the Mongol conquest. And that unstoppable force was massing in the open northern grasslands. We're talking about the Mongols. Fast horses, unbelievable skill, and absolutely terrifying force. In the early 1200s, Genghis Khan united these nomadic tribes and built the largest continuous land empire the world had ever seen. His armies were just relentless. They swept across Asia with sheer speed and terror. By 1279, they had completely and totally conquered China. For the very first time, a foreign power ruled the whole country, setting up the Yuan dynasty. But here is the really fascinating twist. Leaders like Kublai Khan didn't just come in and destroy Chinese culture, he actually absorbed it. He respected the ancient traditions, surrounded himself with Chinese scholars, and famously welcomed the Italian explorer Marco Polo to his magnificent court. But the cycle always turns. Era number 4, Ming Dynasty and Great Walls. Eventually, a harsh combination of disease, terrible famine, and fierce rebellion caused the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty to collapse. It was time for another massive breath in, the incredible rebuilding era of the Ming dynasty. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer improbability of the Ming founder's life. His name was Zhu Yuanzhang. This guy started out as a child in absolute crushing poverty, literally begging for food. Then he scraped by as a wandering, completely impoverished monk. But during the chaotic collapse of the Yuan dynasty, he joined a local rebellion, showed unbelievable courage as a fighter, and step by step rose to the absolute pinnacle of power. By 1368, this former penniless beggar was crowned the Hongwu emperor, officially founding the Ming dynasty. Just an unbelievable rags-to-riches story. And the Ming dynasty was all about making a loud statement of strength and longevity. They were deeply, deeply suspicious of outside threats, right? So they pulled off one of humanity's greatest architectural feats. They rebuilt and massively extended the Great Wall of China. Generations of workers labored to push these walls across brutal mountains and deserts. Some sections were so massively over-engineered that you could walk 5 horses side by side right along the top. And beyond the walls, they sent massive, incredibly sophisticated fleets out across the oceans, led by the explorer Zheng He. It was China's bold declaration to the world. We are strong, we are protected, and we intend to last forever. Which leads us to our final era, the final exhale of imperial China, the end of the empire. Because as we're learning, even the mighty Ming eventually fell. Forever is a word that history rarely respects. In 1644, the Ming dynasty fell to the Manchu people from the northeast, who established the Qing dynasty. Now, the Qing was a vast and incredibly powerful empire for centuries, but the ancient cycle was about to hit a brand new kind of wall. China, which had pretty much always viewed itself as the absolute center of the world, was suddenly facing rapid, immense technological pressure from modern European countries. It was an incredibly painful collision between ancient imperial traditions and modern powers. The empire got battered by external pressures like the Opium War with Britain, and absolutely devastating internal conflicts like the Taiping Rebellion. The ancient imperial system just couldn't hold anymore. Finally, in 1912, after thousands of years of this dynastic cycle, a young boy named Puyi stepped down from the throne. The empire, as it had been known, was over. So the crucial point is this: nothing lasts forever. Not empires, not absolute power, not even great walls. But ideas? Ideas last. The physical things, the terracotta armies, the massive defensive walls, the grand palaces, time eventually takes them all down. But the culture, the art, the scientific knowledge, the stories, those survive. China endured its endless cycles of division not because it was perfect, but because its people consistently found a way to take a breath and simply begin again.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you. This cycle of history is incredibly powerful, but you know what else is? This cycle of learning. Think about it. If an entire civilization can survive for 4,000 years by repeatedly finding the sheer courage to rebuild and begin again, how can you use those lessons for your own life? Every single time you choose to learn something new, you're beginning again. You're taking a breath in. Take these ancient lessons of resilience and curiosity and use them to fuel your own journey of understanding today. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me.